I think the more interesting trend that we've seen, we have 4 clients right now that are going all electric houses. So no natural gas, not even connecting to a natural gas source. Induction cooktops, all electric furnaces, electric water heaters, boilers. Yep. And then they're supplementing that with, or they're powering that with some type of, alternative energy source, whether that's geothermal or solar or both.
All right, welcome to the Curious Builder Podcast. I'm Mark Williams, your host. Today I am joined by Chad and Ryan Hanson from Sustainable9. Thanks for coming on, guys.
You bet.
Yep, thank you.
Well, you guys are located in Linden Hills, Minneapolis.
Mm-hmm.
And why don't you tell us a little bit about your origin story? I mean, I've known you guys now for probably 5-6 years. I remember you had a house in the Parade Homes that I came through first.
Yep.
And you had the green roof garden, and you had kind of a transitional, kind of the modern vibe that you're known for now. But for those that don't know you, why don't you tell us a little bit about A, your history, and B, who you are?
Sure.
Yep.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Chad. I'll let Chad start.
Yeah, well, we're small town boys that grew up in the woods, and we never stopped loving architecture from a young, early age, but we both started in IT and marketing, believe it or not. Did that for about 5 to 10 years, and then got into real estate 20 years ago this year, and never looked back. We just kind of took a left turn straight out of the corporate world, tired of the desk job, basically, and just kind of had a knack for design. So we started small, started acquiring properties, flipping that house, if you will,
Sure.
and did all the work ourselves, from the painting and some of the carpentry to, just the sweeping of the job sites. And we learned a lot doing that, and started to get a following from all the work that we had done. And so we started getting clients to ask us to build a house for them. And so that's how it got started.
That's interesting. Now, you said small town. Is that from Minnesota or where?
Yeah, Wilmer, Minnesota.
Sure.
We
Yeah.
grew up north of the town in the woods, about 10 miles. So.
And where did you guys start doing your initial flips and investments?
Mostly
South Minneapolis.
Yeah, South Minneapolis. Some we did some in St. Paul too, but I mean, it was mostly Minneapolis, I think, is where we started. I'd say. Chad forgot one point. Our parents, when we were really young, they used to always. We lived in Wilmer, so we'd come up to the cities for our like shopping trips. You know?
Oh, yeah.
But they would always coincide it. I think because it was free entertainment, they would coincide it with the Parade of Homes.
Yep.
So we would go to the Parade of Homes. We'd go to the Dream Homes when we were like young.
Yeah.
I'm talking like 7, 8, 9, 10 years
So
old.
this would have been the, 80s and 90s?
80s and 90s.
Yeah.
Well, actually 80s back then.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was great. I think it
We can
instilled
say
this-
90s. That makes me sound
Yeah,
younger.
that makes me feel older, or younger, I should say. But no, I think it instilled us at an early age just about design and cool houses, and here we are building them today.
You guys probably know this, but the Parade of Homes is celebrating its 75th anniversary right now.
Oh, is it?
This year? Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And it's the oldest in the country.
Yeah,
which is
I
kind of
did
cool.
know
And I
that.
had a similar story. We're similar ages. My dad was a builder, and we had homes in the Parade Homes. In fact, I think they had one of the first homes in the Dream Homes. It was in Deer Run in Victoria.
Oh, wow.
And I remember because I grew up without a TV, which probably explains what's wrong with me. and anyway, but they had a DVD player. No, the Blu-ray. I don't know what it was. It was before those, and it looked like a giant frisbee.
Oh, Laserdisc.
Laserdisc.
Yes.
Thank you. And they had. I remember the movie. It was with Charlie Sheen and whoever. It was Navy SEALs. And I remember, I was probably a high schooler. I was like, "Oh, this is amazing!" So we went to the Dream Home to watch it, and it was like going to a movie. It was amazing. Anyway, that's my
awesome.
Dream Home. They had a golf cart, and I thought, "Oh man, anyone who could have a golf cart in a house must just be just living high off the hog."
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
It's like they've made it.
They've made it. If you have a golf cart, custom golf cart,
Yeah.
oh man, you
Yeah.
got it. So
Totally.
okay, so you're Wilmer. You're coming up to the cities. You're seeing the big cities. Did you guys move up here? Like, why did you start your? You must have been already here, I'm guessing, when you started
Yeah, we
doing
both
your
went to college here locally.
Gophers or what?
I was an Augsburg Eagle, and he was a Hamlin Piper.
Hamlin Pipers.
Okay, Hamlin
So-
Piper.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
Yep, for sure. It was
And then
awesome.
our parents moved up too, and so now they actually are involved in our business.
Oh,
too.
they really?
They retired from healthcare, and our mom is our wonderful office manager. She answers the phones.
That's
and
amazing.
Our dad is the gopher. He just kind of runs around and does whatever we ask him.
It's
to
so
do.
funny.
So-
We have similar to you guys, kind of a family business. They're not actively involved anymore, but my mom, she's in her 70s now, but she'll often be at our parade homes because on the weekends
Yes.
she just wants to be around.
That's
and
our mother as well.
she knows they've built about 1,000 homes in their career.
Wow.
I can't tell you how many homeowners that we work with years later said one of the reasons why we worked with you is because of kind of the family nuances. She's like, and my mom can talk to anyone for a long period of time, and whether they want to or not is another question. But they'd be up in the bonus room, and I thought the couple would be gone, and like an hour and a half later, this couple will come out of the room, and like they're like, oh, we've been talking to your mother. She's sweet. We know all about you, and it's like, man, you can't. I mean, you could not impress your story upon somebody better than that. But anyway, it does speak to the personal nature of a home.
For sure.
Yeah.
And I think it does actually, we didn't do that obviously on purpose, but it just is who we are. And so
we had my father-in-law once said about my mother, he said, your mother is quietly powerful.
Oh,
yeah. It really resonated because that's exactly how she is. She can talk to the president of the United States one minute and a homeless person the next that's down on their luck and treat them the exact same way, right? Yep. And so I think they've instilled those values in us, and but they're a big part of our success. They're salespeople, but they're not intending to be. That's just their nature, is that they'll talk to anyone for hours at a Parade of Homes event. So we have the same experience.
I'm coming to your next home. You better have your mom there. I want to talk to her.
Absolutely.
Actually, I'll bring my mom, but it'll be a mom's gathering. We'll do
You would not know how many times that they've helped us. Chad and I are running late, and they're like, we're here. We've got the lights on. We've got the music on. Everything is ready to go walk in, and right at noon. Right when the parade starts or the artisan tour starts. It's like they're a huge help. And like Chad, it's just like our mom will just sit there and talk to the most random people, and it's like, oh, that person just became a lead. It's great.
I think connecting with people on a personal level, again, you can't overemphasize how personal a home is. Mm-hmm. I've mentioned it many times on the podcast. Other than like planning for your wedding, planning a home is so personal. There's so much emotion, and it can be good. A lot of times as builders, obviously, we sometimes will connect and say, hey, this is emotional drag, and I think you do it almost for therapy with each other. But ultimately, most of it is very uplifting. We couldn't continue to do this for your 20 years. I'm on year 19. You couldn't do this for as long as we have if the emotion wasn't uplifting. I mean, if you had, it just wouldn't be possible. You'd be fried. And so it is a very rewarding business. I know sometimes there's obviously stories out there of this, that, and another thing, and it goes both ways too, right? Yeah. It's just a very emotional, roller coaster driven process.
Yeah, it's the biggest purchase decision most people are going to make in their lives. So it naturally comes with a lot of emotion. So
going back to the beginning, when you guys, your name has always intrigued me. I suspect you get this a lot. Sustainable 9. Yep. Tell me about what that name means. Sure. And when did you know that from day one? I know some of the things it's associated with, but I want people, especially outside of Minnesota, that are listening to this to understand a little bit more of your story.
Sure. Yeah. It kind of for me, it started a little over 20 years ago. Before we formed the company, I was looking at building my first home, and I went out and found a lot, and I was ready to build, and I was quite frustrated, frankly, that nobody seemed to really, any of the builders that I interviewed at that time really didn't have any idea about building science, what it takes to make a house more sustainable, more healthy. I think that's a piece that we can talk about today, but it's a piece that gets forgotten. Everybody thinks, solar and geothermal. Well, that's what makes a house sustainable. But a lot of it is also the products that we're using in the house can't be awful to breathe. You can't have all these toxins that are off-gassing. And so anyway, that experience at the time of my IT and marketing career was almost galvanized me to say, hey, this is a niche that doesn't exist in the Twin Cities right now. Nobody's focusing on building healthy, sustainably focused, energy efficient houses. And so that's what made me take the left turn out of IT. And then about a year later, Ryan joined me, and the two of us, we said, we need to come up with a name that actually personifies what our focus is, and that focus is on building sustainable green homes. And the 9 comes from, it just so happens we found a Wikipedia article, honestly, when we were trying to figure out how to name the company, on a consortium of architects, global architects that got together and said, how do we make the world a more sustainable place? Just not necessarily on housing, but just in general, a more sustainable place to live. And so they came up with 9 steps that they were going to implement and kind of all sign on, put their John Hancock on the document. And so we read those 9 steps, and even though they weren't necessarily specific to real estate or construction, they all had a general theme. And so now those 9 steps are kind of codified in our being, if you will. And so
interesting. Is that part of your? I was looking at your website before the interview, just looking at some other work that you've done and kind of brushing up some details.
Yeah.
Is that 9? I didn't actually look, but I didn't see. Is the 9 tenants on there somewhere?
It's not right now, but we are about to launch a new website.
Ooh,
so
that's
yeah,
exciting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Breaking
been a long
news.
time coming.
No, we have a whole section on sustainability that we're finalizing right now, and those 9 steps will be a big part of it. But it's also, there's a lot of other stuff that goes into it too. But those 9 tenants essentially will be very. It's what we live and breathe, and honestly, it's the staff that we have. It's why they've come to work for us.
I could believe that.
Yeah, it's a big part of who they are as people, and it's helped us attract some of the brightest and most amazing people. They really, we all like to say that we're nerds at heart, and I think it's a testament to the staying power of a sustainably focused company too. Is these people are passionate and they want to do the right thing, and so it comes across in not only the designs that we produce with our partners, but also the construction techniques and the eye for detail, right? And so that nerd in all of us, we wear it with the badge of honor, I think, and that's our employees definitely all call themselves nerds. And
I mean, it's your superpower, right? I mean, it's
Yes.
your differentiator, I think, and we'll
Absolutely.
talk maybe a little. Well, we can talk now. I mean, you guys were one of the first ones to really identify. I mean, back then, LEED, LEED, was kind of. I remember just being, that was more of a commercial thing, and you could do it residentially, but it was very cost prohibitive at the time.
Yep.
Now we have Green Path building certification and some other things like that, and it seems like there are some other builders that are targeting that, but. By and large, it still seems, at least for the clients that we're attracting, it was important early on that people would ask those questions. But I felt like there's a lot of greenwashing, and that's just basically, for those that aren't familiar with that term, essentially, basically people say it's green, but it's really not any different.
Correct.
It's just a bit of a brush. But and I've often heard it described as there's greenback greenies, and then there's you believe in green, and the difference there is, like, does it make financial sense to, hence the greenback, to make these changes, or am I believing it from a sustainability and a longevity standpoint? I feel like they're two totally different tracks that can sometimes align, and maybe speak a little bit to that.
Yeah. So, I mean, Green Path, all our homes are Green Path certified. That's kind of not to downplay Green Path, it's a great certification, but we have a whole kind of ladder, if you will, of certifications, and that's kind of the starting point. And, there's Energy Star for homes. Like you mentioned, LEED is really not as sought after. It's just more complex, and it's much more for commercial.
Yep.
But then we follow that up with the EPA's Indoor Air Plus certification.
So would you say these are rungs on a ladder when you talk to clients? So you've got your Green Path through the Minnesota Housing First, then you'll have Energy Star. Why don't you speak to that? What is the Energy Star?
Most people have heard of Energy Star, but they think of like, oh, my appliances are Energy Star certified, or my windows might be. Well, this is a whole house certification. So it's a rigorous list, a checklist that we have to meet in order to get that certification. And so each of these certifications kind of build on top of one another. So in order to get the next run up, for example, the EPA's Indoor Air Plus certification, you have to have achieved the Energy Star certification. So beyond that, we typically go for the Zero Energy Ready certification from the Department of Energy. And then from there, it can go a number of different ways. There's things like Passive House certification, which came from Germany, and now there's a Passive House US. Those things start to get much more on the LEED side, and that's usually where a client starts to say, I'm not sure if I want to spend the money on that. And then there's other clients that say, yes, I absolutely want that.
And to explain passive to those listening, my understanding of it is basically you consume the same amount of energy as you produce. Is that?
Yes, essentially in a nutshell, that's exactly right. Yeah, it's a pretty complex, nerdy conversation if we want to go there, but yeah, it's in a nutshell, that's correct. Yeah. So, but anyway, I guess the way we look at it with our clients is we build every home to a certain standard, and that standard is the EPA's Indoor Air Plus, as well as the Zero Energy Ready for Home certification from the Department of Energy. Those two certifications are quite difficult to get, and it's a lot of documentation about where our products are being sourced from, the toxins that they should not have in them, And then on top of that, just the energy efficiency piece, triple pane windows, exterior insulation, different wall section.
So every house you have will have triple pane windows and exterior insulation, or to varying degrees. They have this checklist in you and the client. I mean, there's a lot of things going on here, right? It's the it's the architecture, and we'll talk a little bit about unfold architecture in a minute. But you have them, you have the interior designers. Are the interior designers on your inner team, on Sustainable Nines team?
4 interior designers on staff.
Because I would imagine that's pretty crucial in that sense, because they need to know which products to even recommend if they're not in alignment with your your protocols. That you're going to be pulled off pretty quick, I would imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a gentleman named Paul at our office too that just kind of leads and makes sure that we're checking all those boxes on all those certifications, because it is time consuming. But I mean, it's essentially the way I would look at it from a customer standpoint is that we've already done all the hard work behind the scenes. We've educated ourselves, our team. We have the certifications in house that we need in order to produce those kinds of results. But the clients end up only paying just slightly more for the products that require exterior insulation or the triple pane windows. So generally, the number one question we get asked is, well, isn't it way more expensive to build this way? And the answer is sort of. I mean, it depends on the degree that you take it, but most clients will spend somewhere between 1% to maybe 3% more upfront to build a sustainably focused house. But then the payback that they're getting in terms of the energy savings and the comfort and the non-toxic environment. I mean, all of that. Some of that's hard to quantify, right? Your health.
Yep. We had somebody once that had a lot of respiratory issues even before COVID. Actually, we built this house during COVID as well, and so there was even every meeting. I mean, he was double N95ing masking, basically saying like, "Hey, if I get anything, I'm dead." Yep. And so we ended up, not to your level, obviously, but we had the ultraviolet, which is killing 99% of the bacteria, plus the HEPA filters on all the HVAC stuff, just to basically get it to a place within reason for him. He's like, "That's all the farther I want to take it, and I feel comfortable with that." But this episode is brought to you by the Scout Guide Minneapolis. The Scout Guide is a curated guide of Twin Cities' hottest spots, companies, people, venues, and events, focusing on all things local and small business. When you pick up their magazine, it just feels different. You open up the ads, and they're not just, the team in front of the building with your normal photo. It's vibrant, it's unique. It might even be set in a completely unusual setting, something that catches your eye and not only tells the story in a picture, but lets you know that that's a company that you want to go visit. Look for something different this year. Pick up the Scout Guide. You won't be disappointed. And if you're looking for advertising, I'd highly recommend it. They have an incredible social push. One thing that I was really interested in is that they will go to your events. They will go to your place of business. They will ask you questions that they then post on their feeds, and they have quite a following. Find them on social media platforms at the Scout Guide Minneapolis. What, for those that are builders in Minnesota, you're familiar with the HERS scores, which is basically the miles per gallon of your car, analogized to a house. What would be some common HERS scores for your homes? To put it in minutes, for those that understand what that is, a relative term.
Yeah, I mean, so for those that don't know, a score of 100 is essentially, a code-built house. A score of 0 is essentially someone that it's essentially producing more, or essentially a net zero energy rated house, right? And so you're consuming the same amount of electricity as I'm not saying
the
that
energy.
correctly.
The energy you consume is the same as the energy you produce.
Yes, thank you.
Right. Hence, it's not. I mean, it's a net zero essentially.
Yes. Yep. So we've had a house that actually scored a -8.
What?
Yeah.
It produced more energy.
Yes. Yep. A house on St. Paul on Mississippi River Boulevard.
Wow.
We built it for this wonderful family, and the client was a big part part of that certification process, right? They had to be all on board to get it to that level. And he was very much a nerd at heart, just like us, right? And he was driving the process. Like we were looking at U values on Windows, like down to 0.001.
He had a whole spreadsheet full of.
Before he even met you, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
I mean, we're pretty nerdy when it comes to that, but he had. Yeah, his spreadsheet was next level.
He out-nerded you.
Yeah, I'm talking about every brand you could possibly think of.
Yeah,
like that you either have or haven't used. I mean, he got it all the way down, but then was looking at the trade-offs from each.
Did out of curiosity, because we can learn from our clients as well. Did you end up taking anything from that spreadsheet that he had and kind of implementing it in house because it was so good?
I'm trying to remember. I think
to some degree.
I think we maybe did.
Yeah.
At least for U values change every couple of years, depending on what window they are. But yeah, we used some of them, I think.
Yeah.
Going forward.
If nothing else, just the concept was cool. So that, that's an extreme case, right?
That's
the
an
-8
extreme
is
case.
incredible.
Yep.
If you were to build, let's say, I have 4 steps written down, Minnesota Green Path, you've got the Energy Star, the EPA, the Zero. Let's just say you had a 6,000 square foot house, without getting crazy, what would your expected HERS value be?
Yeah, I think some of it depends on the amount of glass that you have in their house. And you've seen our homes, they have a lot of glass.
They do.
I mean, that is one of the things that counts against you, I guess, a little bit on the HERS score. So for the homes that don't have much glass, we can get those scores down into the teens or the 20s.
That's incredible.
But in general, I would say the majority people come to us for 2 different reasons. The modern architecture that typically most of our homes are modern, and people tend to love that, but also the sustainability piece. But if you've seen a lot of modern homes, you know that they have large panes of glass, and so you're going to probably end up in the 30s, but most likely the low 40s. But any score under 50, in my opinion, is a difficult score to get. I mean, I remember when we were consistently in the early stages getting 46 to 50, and it was a struggle just to get that score with that amount of glass. And so now we're using more advanced framing techniques, different insulation techniques.
So out of curiosity, go ahead.
I was just going to say one thing too on that house that we got the -8 score. The reason you can get down there and get a lot of those points taken off is to he did solar and we did geothermal. So when you combine both those,
Right.
I mean, he's getting a check back from Excel Energy every single month.
Right.
I mean, and the house is super insulated, had the high U values and stuff. But
And he also didn't have a lot of glass either. It wasn't as
he did.
important to him.
Yeah,
So.
I mean, I've seen that, and you and I would know that. But I mean, obviously, if you want to get to net zero, it's a balance between the energy performance and, let's say, the architecture style.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And so you see some of these homes, and not your homes necessarily, because they're way more detailed. But I mean, you could build a. I think of like the barns. What I'm blanking on here. The metal, the SIP panel barns. I mean,
Sure.
they're extremely pole built barns.
Yeah.
I mean, they're extremely efficient, actually. I mean, you're SIP panel the whole way around. They're not that expensive. You throw a little heater in there. That thing is super efficient.
Yep.
But there's not a single window in the thing.
Yeah.
And so you are 100% efficient on your wall paneling. Your thermal bridging is all gone.
Yep.
So that part's great.
Yep.
Our homes, I think, are normally kind of in the 45 to 48 range, and we're not doing any external insulation. We're just starting to now. Part of it is I've offered it up as I'm really enthusiastic about it, trying to get our clients. But for me personally, our clients have not been willing to pay for some of the upgrades. And maybe it's, you and I know there's thousands of line items on a home, and we can't price ourselves. We still want to be competitive, but you also want to demonstrate what is a quality home. And no matter, it could be a $2 million home, a $5 million, or a $10 million home. There's always limits, and whatever limit you're building to that client, they think that more should be included than it really is. And so it's part of it is optics, us explaining to the client, and then I would imagine some of it is, hey, this is just how we build. I'm sure there's a bunch of things that we do that I consider normal that I don't even think about that leads to performance. But one of the things that I would really like to do, I think for our homes, it's about a $20,000 upgrade to do like a R6 rigid foam exterior on everything. It's hard when I tell a client, hey, your let's say your house is 1.7 or 2 million, and will you pay for this $20,000 upgrade for insulation? And in their mind, if they're not already passionate about it, they're thinking like, I could take that $20,000 and make a really killer bar in the basement. Why am I just having a little more insulation in my jacket? Or you'll hear some wisecracker say, just turn up the heat. I would imagine that at least for our clientele, this is a complete stereotype. So I apologize, because there's definitely people out there that are more advanced. But my clientele lately has been, a lot of them have been kind of, let's say, 55 and above. I imagine that the younger generation is going to be more educated, and they're also growing up in an age where every other day in the paper we're hearing about global warming, and so I would imagine that, like anything, the younger generation would change it. But I'd ask you that question, because you've actually done this. Are your clients, as an average age, younger than, let's say, 55? Like, where are your what? I know there's always going to be someone that's really into it that as an older age, but as an average, what are you seeing?
We're not necessarily seeing a difference in terms of age, it's interesting. Maybe it's just pure luck right now, but it seems like across all ages, the clients that are doing these things are doing it for those reasons. I would say the biggest, the hardest sell for us is the exterior continuous insulation, just because right now I think it's not common enough in the local market. So the installers and frankly also the material costs, but the installers just aren't familiar enough with it, so they're charging more for learning on the job.
Yep.
Right. And so I think eventually as the code updates and more builders adopt this as just a standard practice, that number will start to come down. But if a client's pushing back on that, we're pushing them to at least make sure they're going to a triple pane window. That's where they're going to get the biggest bang for their buck in terms of return on investment, or solar or geothermal. But then I think the more interesting trend that we've seen really recently, and it's because of, I think, what's happening in Ukraine with Russia and the kind of the natural gas environment, is we have 5 clients right now. I'm sorry, 4 that are going all electric houses. So no natural gas, not even connecting to a natural gas source. And so
not even connecting to it.
No. So induction cooktops, all electric furnaces, electric water boilers. Yep. And then they're supplementing that with, they're powering that with some type of, alternative energy source, whether that's geothermal or solar or both. And it's pretty incredible. We weren't pushing that. Clients came to us asking for it, and so now it's been great. But now we're actually adding that to our list of services, if you will.
Looking on, what I think is great is you guys have had, let's say, a decade and a half of learning on the job, what I would imagine, practicing on your own homes, developing your story, and now as this has kind of come full mainstream, you guys are kind of the apex predators to handle. Is that an accurate statement, to be like, hey, now as you differentiate yourself between, say, another builder, you're like, yeah, they might talk about it, but like, we've been doing this for 15 years. I imagine that's a huge differentiator.
Yeah,
for sure. I mean, it's funny, some of the people that come, our clients that come to us, they might not be the biggest green nerd, but when they see all of this stuff put together, and they see the stuff like in Ukraine and stuff, they look at that and say, okay, in an all electric house, they might just be a complete numbers person and looking at it like, hey, if I put solar on this house, I could offset my entire heating, cooling, electrical load, everything, right? Because they are taking that completely off, and they don't have any natural gas in their house. So to me, I think it's
a financial decision.
It's a financial decision.
Yeah.
Not so much as it is. But the other thing I'll say about exterior continuous insulation is just the houses that we've built, that we've done that, the comfort level is off the charts better. You can just feel it.
Do you feel like you just R6 or beyond that, or even once you get to an R6, you can feel that?
We're typically doing an R10.
R10.
Yep. And so we're using like a Rockwool insulation, I
love Rockwool.
Yep. On the outside, because that actually adds, there's other benefits, sound insulation. And so, for example, we built a 3-unit row home right over here in Linden Hills that had exterior continuous insulation with Rockwool on the outside, and it's right in the airport, flight path.
Oh, I know. I lived 2 blocks away from there. Yeah, my kids, think it's normal for a giant airplane to fly over your head every 5 minutes.
Where you can read the serial number.
I don't even actually notice it anymore. Whenever I have visitors come over, they're constantly like looking up, and I'm like, at this point, I don't even know they're there.
Right.
Yeah,
kind of get used.
It's just a giant bird.
Yeah, right.
But it helps with that sound insulation. Sure. You can't hear cars going by, and then on top of it, there's some. If there ever was tragically like a fire, that product is more fire retardant than
Rockwool is an incredible product. Yeah. For those listening, if you don't know anything about Rockwool, check them out. They're their stuff is just really cool. Yeah. So you're so getting a little nerdy here. So you are plywooding the exterior of your house? Are you using like a zip system, and then you're doing your weather? Walk me through your envelope, because obviously if you get into an R10, that's a lot of labor.
Yep.
And obviously you're training these guys, and over time it'll get better. Some of the other products, of course, as you would know, whether it's OSI or Zip, these are just name brands if you're not familiar with what we're talking about, where essentially the insulation is rigid and it's inside the framing member, so the framers can just obviously put it up and away you go. Walk us through your building envelope, because I think that's really important to the building science for those listening.
Yeah, the research that we've done and put into practice is that we've we have done a few projects in the past with those products that you mentioned, Zip in particular, but we've kind of steered away from that. And so our interior wall cavities are either, like an EcoBat, so it's not a spray foam anymore. Back in the day, we were doing spray foam insulation, and that was the number one way to get a house super tight. And now we're moving away from that, just from the health reasons solely.
And so just to be clear, an EcoBat, is that replacing fiberglass bats?
Yeah,
it's
it's essentially a more healthier version of a fiberglass insulation.
Okay.
So, or a dense pack cellulose, that could be the alternative to that. It just depends on the actual client and the circumstances.
Or even Rockwell.
Yeah, or even Rockwell.
Rockwell's nice. I mean,
yep.
the sound, going back to sound again, we
Yep.
do a lot for sound with Rockwell
Mhm.
on the inside. I mean, that just kills sound.
Yep.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And then we have the plywood sheathing, and then we have a special. Instead of, most people are using Tyvek, we're using a product from I believe it's Germany, isn't it, Ryan? I'm spacing the
Sega?
name.
Yeah, Sega.
Sega.
Yep.
Yep.
Sega's amazing.
Yep.
I've seen it. It's not cheap.
No,
Not
it's
cheap.
not.
No.
Yeah.
What is it about that? I've seen it on the East Coast. There's another builder, Nick Schiffer with NS Builders. He uses it on all his homes. What's the advantage of the Sega? Why that product specifically?
Well, a lot of it is just it's a quality conversation, but it's also, a lot of this is to, I think the bigger point is to get the dew point outside of the building, right?
Does the R10 get you there? I thought you had to be an R15.
The R10, I think it's an R10. I
R10
could be
gets you
wrong.
there. I
Sorry.
don't know. I haven't.
Yep.
Okay.
We should have had Paul on this podcast
Yeah.
with us. He'd be.
I
able
didn't
to
realize I
correct
was going
me
to
if
get
I'm
this
wrong.
technical
me
on it, but
either.
I'm really interested in this process.
So I might not be getting this 100% accurate.
Yeah.
So I should make that disclaimer. But
We'll talk to Paul.
Yeah, we'll talk to Paul. And anyway, so we have the Sega, then we have our Rockwell, and then there's a rain screen, of course, before the siding type goes on.
So the Rockwell can't act as the rain screen? Because it's porous. I mean, that's one of their big advantages, that water can go through it. So you're adding the rain screen on outside of
the typical part of the reason we're adding an additional layer of rain screen is just the Rockwell's a flexible product, right?
Yep.
And so trying to attach, let's say, a James Hardy product or anything else
you'd
to it.
You'd have to strip it somehow with whatever.
Yeah, exactly. So in a way, we're just adding furring strips, but it's acting as a secondary rain screen beyond the I could be forgetting the rain screen on top of the Sega.
No, it's on top of it's on the exterior of the
Rockwell.
ECI.
Without looking at a wall section
Yeah.
detail,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
spacing it
Yep.
here all
Yeah,
of a sudden.
no worries.
But the point is getting the dew point so that it's not getting into the wall.
Right.
cavity,
Oh, I know.
right?
the science behind it is really
Yeah.
incredible.
But one other thing too with Sega, Paul sold me on this. We had always been looking for something other than Tyvek, and we'd used some different products in Tyvek. I'm not ripping Tyvek; still a good product, but how many times have you drove by a house after a storm and that stuff is
Flopping around,
flopping in the wind, and they just come back, and how well does it get reapplied? Where this stuff, it is.
Isn't it a stick? Isn't it like not an EPM or what's it's a petroleum-based product on the back, right?
It literally is like adhered to the.
And do your framers
plywood.
put that on, or your siders, or?
Yep, our
framers
do.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, so that you have to have the right partners. You have to train them on all these products too, and and then we're checking it as it's being built, of course, just to make sure that there's.
But once you get them to do that, and they learn how to do that full wall section, including the exterior continuous ECI, once they get all of a sudden they're like, oh, okay, now we know how to do this. The next time their price is lower. It just is.
Oh, right. No, I know how that works.
They learn how to do it.
No, the first one through the glass ceiling, I get it.
Yeah.
So I just, maybe you don't know this, but as just a total guess, let's say one of my homes, let's say it's a 47 or a 45 on a HERS score. Let's say I go to, not an R10, let's say I go to an R6. Any idea what that would drop? Now, I know you don't know this is a total shot in the dark.
I don't know.
Don't know.
Yeah. I think you'd have to, it's so dependent on the amount of glazing that's on it.
Yeah,
and,
that's true.
So many other.
Do you test your models? Are you able to test the model before you actually build it in like 3D modeling or through your architecture firm?
Yeah, we're starting to partner. We have worked with the Center for Energy and Environment to kind of pre-design the load calcs for all the mechanical systems and everything to make sure that they're going to perform, and then they're coming out. I think it's typically 4 times during construction to verify that everything's getting sealed up right. They're doing blower door tests.
That's all part of your accreditation
Yep.
and the checklist
Yep.
and all that. That's
Yeah,
through
and
Centerpoint?
No, the Center for Energy and
Oh,
Environment.
okay.
Yeah,
CEE.
CEE. That's a local company here that they're not. I believe they're a nonprofit actually.
Yep.
But they can do work for a homeowner too. If you want to get an energy audit on your house, they'll come out and do that. But anyway, we're looking to get that air exchanges per hour, the tightness
Right.
of the house way down. I think code in Minnesota is 3 air changes per hour, I believe, and we're typically getting under 1.
Yep.
Somewhere between
I think we're
0.3 and
like
1.
1.5,
Yeah.
1.6, something
Yep.
like that.
Yep.
Yeah, that just measures, for those listening, that just measures the tightness of how leaky your house is, essentially, right?
Yeah.
Because you're always going to have some leak. I mean, if anything operates and moves, it's going to have some air pass through that.
Yeah.
Is that fair to say?
I had it was in a class once, and an instructor basically used his hands to say, this is the size of the hole that's typically in a code built house. A house that's with an ACH under 1 is something like this. This is the amount of leakage that you're having in a house. So
Yeah, when you add all those holes together, I mean, it is weird to think like, oh, in a normal code but a house, you get this. It's like bigger than like you
drafty.
said. It's just
If you're not
all
watching
that
this,
air is
if you're
going
not
out.
watching this on Spotify or YouTube, basically it's a softball for the small aperture, or it's like the size of one of those giant inflatable blue medicine balls that you actually
Yes,
sit
right.
on.
That's exactly right.
exactly. Yep.
Okay. Interesting.
Mhm.
What? So you guys won an award for. I was looking on your website, the Minnesota Green Path Leadership Award.
Mhm.
Talk to me a little bit about some of the publications, some of the press, some of the leadership roles that you've taken. That I assume maybe you set out to do this, but I'm guessing you came into those leadership roles as you're pursuing your knowledge. Is that accurate?
Yeah, a lot of this is we're learning every day too, right? And so we don't claim to know the best way to do something, so we adjust. And so I think some of the accolades or awards that we're getting is a result of work that maybe we did 5 years ago, and now some of the work that we're doing now is getting different in different categories. For example, that -8 house, it won a national award for. From the Department of Energy for how energy efficient it was, and so that was a really nice recognition for any kind of nerd out there.
I think it's cool that's we have in Minnesota. Obviously, for those not listening, it gets cold here. We can have -20, -30. That 1 week in January, and then our humidity in the summer is crazy.
Right.
That 90%
charts.
humidity at 90 degrees is real fun.
Mhm.
And so we have really big temperature swings, bigger than I would argue than most of the rest of the country.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so, I think it's easy for a lot of builders to say, I know I've said it, is like, oh, net zero, we can't achieve that, or it's not worth it. But the idea that I love the idea that you went -8. That's cool.
Yeah.
Because now you're like, no, not only have we done that, we've actually gotten 8 points better than that.
Yeah.
Yep.
And someone might want to fact check that report, because I don't know, that sounds pretty good to be true.
No,
But
Yep. In fact, that homeowner is continuing to supply us with data that we can.
Oh,
and
that's
the Center
super
for
cool.
Energy and Environment has been a nice partner on that project, because we basically been able to, over time. They've been in the house now, what, 3 or 4 years?
3 years.
It was pre-COVID,
3,
so about
yep.
4 years. And we're seeing just how much they're saving on their, the money savings that they're
Right.
getting as well. So
Well, I love the fact that it gives you for marketing data as well
Yep.
Yeah.
to like explain this to other clients, so that obviously they can do this as well. And I imagine this gentleman probably is so passionate about it, he can't wait to tell you his latest report.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we see. He'll send us,
Details.
like, look how much I saved. But I mean, he's also sending us like the hard data, just the software that runs solar and the geothermal. He can show us
The
like
kilowatt hours
that
he's
he
producing,
is
and
putting back onto the grid. And he's like, I'm still. I don't know if he's like really trying to save a bunch of electricity. He probably isn't. And he's still getting a check back every month. That's what amazes me. I'm like,
So let's talk a little bit about electric. Why, you hear about that a lot, but to educate people, why is electric more sustainable? I mean, obviously we have a lot of, electric cars versus gas, and, you hear about, LP gas versus natural gas. Just give us high level, some education of why, because electric still has to be made. I know there's, obviously coal can make electric, and coal isn't good for the environment. I mean, how do we know that when we're going down the road of electricity, that how they're generating the electricity is also sustainable?
yeah, I mean, it's a great question, and those are questions that honestly are probably best answered by our utilities and our policymakers. But the way we look at it is, I think, to back up even further, Paul uses this phrase, and I'm going to forget what it is, but it's essentially to build a sustainable house, it's first about using less materials, less energy to produce the house in the first place, right? And so a lot of it is about bringing products from within a 100-mile radius, or not using a tremendous amount of or not having, a lot of waste on the job site, whether that's with SIP panels or, selective cutting or ordering products right the first time, just being very diligent about that. But then when it comes to the electric part of it, the debate, I think, is, well, you're still using, potentially a coal-fired plant from your local utility to supply that electricity. Well, I think we all know that grid is slowly being improved, and over time, the hope is that if we're in an all-electric house, that potentially could be powered by solar, either on that house or in a neighborhood solar farm, or from the utility that's potentially participating in some type of solar farm that's maybe in western Minnesota.
Sure.
But yeah, is there an environmental impact to producing the products in an electric home? Of course there is, but is it any more or any less? I mean, that's where I think my level of knowledge starts to peter out. But I think for most of our clients, they're looking at it like they're looking long term, right?
Yep.
They're looking for the next 100 years. For my kids and grandkids, what is making the most sense? It's probably to move away from natural gas or LP.
Well, I saw an interesting stat, and I should have looked it up beforehand. I saw it a couple of months ago. It was in a magazine, and I know it informed me to encourage clients for future stuff to do induction. We're building a little cabin, and we can't do gas anyway, so we'll do electric for sure there. But the fact that, I forget what it was like you're 60% more likely to develop either asthma or some sort of respiratory breathing issue with gas appliances in the house. I was blown away at that, because now it's less about money, and it's less about as it is about your health. And
Absolutely.
I think for sure, if you talk about your children, and we're fortunate at this point, I don't think any of our kids have respiratory issues, but we have gas appliances, and they look pretty, and I sell a lot of them, and that's what we're what people say that they want. But anyway, can you speak a little bit to that, because I think you guys have probably discovered more about that than I know.
I mean, part of the actual natural gas that you're putting into the house, some of it is not actually getting burned, right? And the part that's not getting burned is there's a component of it is benzene, which is a known carcinogen, right? That's benzene causes cancer and other horrible diseases.
Even if your hood fan is on, it's not sucking that out?
Well, you can, to some degree, yes, but is there leakage around the actual pipe? Or the pilot light in your water heater, for example, or your furnace is going to have some leakage to it. And even just right from the meter itself, there's going to be some leakage potentially. And so that benzene is going to build up over time in your home if you're not adequately ventilated. But then when you're actually...
is that why they got rid of the power vent? Or not the power vent, because that has a fan on it, but like the old, was it the atmospheric vents of the old water heaters? Anyone that lives in an old house, you have like this little metal... I mean, I think I do more remodeling than you, so... because you guys do mostly new homes, right?
Yeah.
So like a lot of the old homes, you'll have that little metal, stainless steel hood over it, and like you can see the flame just kind of flickering in there. I think they call it atmospheric. You can keep it if you have it, but if you replace it, it has to be power vented, which is, a PVC pipe that's connected probably to avoid that exact issue for backdrafting and for,
Yeah, but then... See, I'm trying to think where I was going with that, but in general, I think I guess I was just going to comment more on the health side of things. So, I know what I was going to say. So when you're burning natural gas, now you're producing, besides that benzene that's going in the house, now you're producing carbon monoxide, sulfur dioxide, a bunch of other VOCs, volatile organic compounds, all of that, and then fine particulate matter that's floating around in your house. Is some of it getting up out of the vent? Yes. But are you running your vent all the time? I sometimes sit in my in-laws' house. They have natural gas. We have natural gas in my current house that I'm living in. And I know my fan is not sucking all of it out. It's a weak fan, so you got to have a powerful fan that's doing it, or you even just have to have it on. A lot of people forget to turn it on most of the time. So
we have the opposite problem. My wife, I swear, every time I come to the house, every fan in the room is, and I always think about, like, we have a 1919 house here in Minneapolis, and it's like, usually I do it for moisture, right? You leave your shower fans on. I'll leave early in the morning, come home, and I mean, that fan's probably been running for like 10 hours. I'm like, honey, what are you doing?
It's like, what are we saving on this?
Nope, doesn't matter. I think, so sometimes I think, like an old house, I shut off the fans, I go around the house and shut them off. This is moisture, not obviously gas. And anyway, it's a personal thing. I hate moisture, so I do like to get it out, but it doesn't need to run for 8 hours. I have a few other things I want to talk to you about regarding. So we talked a little bit about electric. Talk to us a little bit about solar in geo, and mainly I'll just bring this up for kind of a counterpoint. I was considering I was going to work with a client that had owned a solar company at one point, and he actually ended up selling the solar point. He has a Tesla, and he's all in on it. But he's like, his point is that the solar technology hasn't changed that much in the last however many decades, according to him. And he had just said that, in our climate, people don't factor in, dust, snow. Speak to solar panels, efficiencies, longevity, and how effective are solar panels in Minnesota's climate?
It's funny. I've heard kind of the opposite of that. So I don't know how. I'm not. Yeah. I never owned a solar company, so the guy probably knows what he's talking about to some degree. But I've heard that there's been kind of leaps and bounds.
Funny.
Jumps in terms of the efficiencies of solar panels, the longevity of those panels, but also depending on the type of panel that you're purchasing. In the past, it used to be that if any part of the let's say 2x4 panel was covered in shade or dust, the whole panel was not working.
Oh,
right?
interesting. Okay.
And so my understanding is that they fixed that problem in most of the manufacturing processes now, so that if you're covered with snow or dust or shade on a particular panel, you still are getting the rest of the power from the rest of the panel.
I mean, is anyone actually, when you say dust, I mean, obviously if it rains, I assume it will get clean, but is anyone actually power washing or actually cleaning their solar panels up on their roof?
Not that I
think we get enough rain here where it doesn't matter. All right. I mean, the panels are designed, they're black and they're they've got a clear, smooth surface, so most of the snow goes off of it unless you don't have it set at the proper angle. But like I know the house that we got a -8 on, those were on a more pitched roof, and there's no way snow's staying on those. Maybe some dust and stuff in the winter, but
I think they've solved that problem.
Okay,
but that's a great question. It's kind of beyond my knowledge base, but from what we can just only report on what our clients are experiencing, and they're getting
seeing
the
gains
benefits,
and they're having issues.
Absolutely.
They're doing well.
But I think a lot everybody always thinks is, well, I have to have a ton of solar panels, right? But if you build a house super energy efficient in the first place, and you're using less electricity, then you don't actually need as many panels to run. And so there's this kind of misnomer in the public that, well, I'm going to need all these panels, and it's going to be extremely cost prohibitive to do solar. Well, if you start with a better wall section and a better window,
you have less to heat or more efficient to heat.
Yep.
I get it.
Yeah.
Interesting. What early on, I mean, I assume this is where design reinforces. I mean, I'll call it the transitional modern style that you have, or modern, however you want to. You love a lot of these angled roofs. What angle would those roofs be? I mean, people can't see what I'm motioning to, but you've got kind of this. Is it 412, 612? Like, what kind of angle is that? I feel like a lot of your homes have kind of that long shed roof angle on it.
Yeah, they vary anywhere from completely flat, to a steep.
We did a 212.
Just recently.
But then,
we do anything. I would say there's a lot of 212, 312, 412 low pitched roofs, and as long as they're facing the right directions, then they can still achieve solar.
And your solar panels are going on top of that stuff anyway, so I mean they can adjust each. Even if you had a low pitch roof, you could change the angle of your panel to meet the sun's angle.
Yeah, on a flat roof, for example, you're going to have a parapet wall that's sticking up at least a couple feet, and then the panels are going to be angled towards the sun on a rack of some kind. And so, just because it's flat doesn't mean you can't. I mean, usually flat roofs are actually really great for solar. So.
Right. Is because you have an even deck to put everything on, and then kind of move it around to catch whatever angle you want. What I mean, do you work with a local solar company? I mean, who is there a number of around? Do they buy local? Where are these panels made? You hear a lot of them. Hey, they're being made in California. They're being made in China. Or where are these panels coming from?
I don't know specifically, so I'm not the right person.
Paul
Paul would know that.
We need Paul.
We need Paul.
I didn't realize I was going to ask this.
Yeah,
I guess
sorry.
I'm curious. Builders living up to its namesake. I'm very curious about the solar.
All Energy Solar has been our partner for a while
Okay.
on most of our solar projects, but I mean, there's other solar companies we've worked with that are great as well. So, but
we'll have
they're a
them
big
on,
one.
and
Yeah.
we'll have them on. Their
They would
ownership
know.
On.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
they would.
We'll have him.
They'll
Actually,
know
that'd be cool. We'll have them on and Paul. And,
Yeah,
Yeah.
Paul would
I'll
love
just
to.
sit, ask the questions, and let them
Yeah.
volleyball back and forth.
Paul's a mechanical engineer by trade, by the way. This degree, so he can get pretty technical.
All right.
You know,
All right. Where does geothermal fit into all of this? Because you've got, I mean, obviously I know what geothermal is. You're basically taking the average temperature of the Earth's heat and, you're warming up the difference. But how are you, just for those that don't understand it, you've got your vertical tubes, you've got your horizontal tubes. Are you often doing kind of belt and suspenders, solar and geo together? How do you, when you're presenting all this to a client, how are you presenting these different elections? Is it from a cost standpoint? Is it from a performance standpoint? How are you educating your client?
That's a good question. I mean, so much of it depends on the specific site, you
Yeah.
know, and the angles of the sun and how much space we might have for those vertical or horizontal wells. So we have a whole sustainability focused meeting where all we talk about is mechanical systems and solar and geo and how they all interplay together. And it's a conversation around comfort, energy efficiency, the healthiness of the home. And so we're looking at it holistically, I guess is the best way to answer your question.
Yeah, that's
and so some people will choose just to do geothermal day one, and they'll just wire for solar and then maybe add that later, but at least they have that option. So that's typically if someone's going to cut costs, unfortunately, usually solar gets the axe at the end, but they put the geo in because they know that's, you
got to drill in. It's going to make a mess.
tear
Or you
up
could,
your
I
yard.
see. Yep.
Yeah.
You can add it on later. That makes sense.
I think the thing to think too, like for geo, it's again, I keep coming back to the house. We got -8 on. I mean, that was a St. Paul lot on the river. I mean, people think like, oh, I need this huge acreage to have geo. You don't. I mean, like they can drill the wells straight down. I mean, this was on almost the river bluff. I mean, they were far enough out of the river so they weren't going into the water. But I mean, to me, it's like you could put that on any lot. I think people forget that too. I think that's a thing to remember.
I think if they think, especially a horizontal loop system, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Or like you think of a farm field. I mean, I personally, no matter where I lived, I would want a vertical system just because then I don't have to worry about, this thing being exposed,
Exactly.
this
Sure.
massive
Yep.
field. The first home I mentioned right when we started, the first home I ever went through, I think was the one you had off of Zenith or Xerxes. You've done a few out there,
Oh,
but
yeah.
it was the one, the roller derby.
Oh yeah, yep.
was that-
50th and
Beard.
Yeah,
Beard,
I remember
50th
what had the
Beard.
roller derby
yeah.
posters or something in the basement.
Yep.
Yeah.
Great client.
Great client. So
he's an
anyway, I was
awesome
like, I remember that. That was how many years ago would that have been?
Oh, that's probably going on
6 maybe. He was a
6.
part owner in the Minnesota Roller Girls.
Okay.
So that wall.
He was a
paper was-
referee for him too.
Okay.
Yeah.
But that one had a roof. Where I was going with this is a roof garden. So walk me through a roof garden. I mean, it's obvious. So you've got a flat roof. Are they trays? I mean, obviously people see the green, but obviously me having built houses, like where does the water go? The loading. Does somebody mow it? How do you manage this? Like, how does someone go about doing a roof garden in a way that makes sense?
Sure.
Yeah. That particular house and most of those green roofs we've done have been from a product called Live Roof. Our local retailer Bachman sells
that's
those
funny.
trays.
Yep. They sell the trays, right?
The trays, yep. And so they're just interlocking trays. You pull out the sides of the trays and the soil grows together. But then there's still a plastic guard on the bottom to help protect the rubber membrane roof.
Okay.
But we put an extra slip sheet down of rubber before we install that. And then,
So you have 2 layers of rubber?
yeah. Mhm.
Really? Are they both EDPM or?
Yeah, the first layer is the actual roof the part
Yeah.
that's protecting the house, and then the second part is just a loose layer that's laid.
Like a slip sheet,
a slip
Oh.
sheet.
so
Yep.
it doesn't like flying around. But
Yeah.
But
It's
the
just-
product is just it's sedum is the name of the
plant.
It's the plant.
It's a drought tolerant plant. It grows naturally here in Minnesota. It's beautiful. It's green, red, and some little bit of some oranges in there sometimes. And then you have to trim it about once, maybe twice a summer. So we have to tell clients that you be prepared to, get your trimmers out or a weed whipper or something just to bring the height back down and keep it manageable so it doesn't turn into a weed garden.
Do you have to irrigate it too with like misters and stuff?
It just depends on the type of summer we're having. Like last summer we had a lot of rain, and it's considered a drought tolerant plant. So as long as I think it's like 1 inch a month.
1 inch a month is what
then
it is.
it survives
Which
just
I can't
fine on
imagine
its
it's
own.
not getting 1 inch a month.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even in our climate, we have to be getting 1 inch, right? At least you would think.
Yeah.
But the sedum too, once you trim that, you can just let the clippings fall because it regrows. So it's like they just.
Do you have to, so that now for those listening to, ballast essentially be like rocks or something like that. Do you have to engineer the weight of the trusses to handle just the, I think one pod wouldn't be that much, but I imagine an entire roof deck would actually probably be a significant amount of weight, right? Could you just add a live roof on top of one that's already there without engineering or not?
You'd have to check with the structural engineer, but generally we're telling our structural engineer ahead of time. Like, hey, make sure you understand. Well, it's written right on the plans. Like, hey, there's a green roof here. I believe it's 5 pounds per square foot, or is it 20 pounds per square foot? I cannot remember.
Paul,
So-
where's Paul?
Where's Paul?
No, so actually, I've had to look into this a bunch when we first started doing it. Live Roof they have multiple different models, if you will.
Sure.
It's almost like they have one that is it's like a retrofit. So it's made for, some roof trusses that weren't ever designed for it. But then we are usually using the next step up from that. But then you can get, I think there's
Thicker
2 or
version,
3,
more
like the
so.
really thick one. You don't have to grow sedum. I mean, that's where people were like, I want a garden. I'm going to grow tomatoes. I'm going to grow sunflowers. You can get ones that are really thick. But again, then you're starting to get some more beefier roof trusses then, right? I mean, you're holding a tank up there at that point with all the water, and stuff when it gets up there. So
Right. Well, I think we tackled sustainable
Oh my
pretty
gosh.
good there. Well, I'm really interested in it. Hopefully those
Yeah.
listening are as well. I want to talk a little bit. I think this is Ryan's department a little bit. Development. So the condo complex that you guys are doing. I don't know if you guys are doing any commercial, but I know you're doing some Shakopee developments and some Prior Lake developments. Talk to a little bit about your business structure, just from a building point of view. I think when I was first aware of you guys were doing mostly, tear downs, pre-solds for clients. Now it seems like you're doing quite a few models now.
Yep. I think we were always, a lot. We started out doing, before anybody knew who we were, right? You had to get your name out there, right?
Yep.
So we did more spec homes back there and kind of built up that fan base, if you will, right? And, there was a period there where we were doing almost 100%. Everything was custom. We weren't really doing many specs, maybe one model here or there, but we still are doing a ton of that, and that is definitely our core focus of the business. But we've expanded now. I've nerded out a lot on like the Minneapolis 2040 plan, right? I mean, there's, like it or not, it's coming, right? And it's here. And I think the cool part about it is it's a way to add density, and I think we can add density in a cool way where people wouldn't have thought, like, oh, they're just going to be building this massive apartment building next to me. And it's like, no, you can actually do something like these 3-unit row homes that we built overlooking Linden Hills Park. They were, I think at first the neighborhood was apprehensive, but once we saw it, we actually had it on 2 tours. We had it on the artisan home tour, the luxury home tour, and we had a ton of people through there that were just like, boy, this is really cool. It fits the neighborhood. But yet, the way I always look at it is it took one home and turned it into a home for 3 different families.
Right.
Which is
it was a
huge.
wide lot. I remember I used to play tennis there all the time.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I
Right.
remember looking at that when it was for sale.
Yep.
Yeah, interesting.
There's a sustainability factor to that too,
Yeah.
right? I mean, we're taking people that potentially would have had to move to a suburb, and drive farther to work, that are now moving much closer into the city and to walkable neighborhoods. And so I think that's been our goal: is how do we do these how do we take an infill lot and make it
So was that your
accessible.
first townhome or row homes what did you kind of learn through that process?
I think it was funny because the Minneapolis 2040 plan literally went into effect on January 1st of that year. We were the second person because we submitted our plans. We knew it was coming. We submitted our plans, I think, on January 3rd. And we were the second people in the whole city. So all the city staff was pretty much learning along with us because they had never done this. They were just like, well, this is it. Should have gone through the planning commission, and now it doesn't even have to for up to a 3-unit building, right? So I think there was a big learning curve there, just on the city's part. we kind of knew what we did. I mean, perfect example is we're just like, boy, we didn't really even learn. We're like, oh, we need to put, this is a 3-unit, it's more than a 2-unit building, it's a 3-unit building. We need to put a sprinkler system in this. It's required, right? So anything more than 3 units, you're doing it. So I think that was one learning lesson we learned right there.
And this was all a model, right? This was not pre-sold?
Yeah, it was all model. Well, actually, I shouldn't say it. We had one that was kind of
we
pre-sold.
built one unit for our parents.
Yep.
And so they were getting up there in age, and we wanted to
Keep them close to the office so they could walk to work.
accessibility. Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. So it was an accessibility focused building too, right? Handicap wheelchair accessibility was a big part of that project. Not only the sustainable. So each unit came with its own private elevator or an option to add an elevator. And that honestly is what sold all the other 2 units. We roughed in for an elevator and a closet.
We do that a lot for even our younger clients. We had a house. I wanted to go see that home because we had a home in the Artisan tour at the same time as you did, but I was working my tour home, so I couldn't sneak away to yours. And but we often will stack the closets. And that couple I built for was very young, probably in their late 30s. And I just simply said, it's good insurance policy because we work with a lot of people in their 50s and 60s. And sometimes, especially in Minneapolis, you can't do main floor masters because the property's just not big enough. If you want some other things on your main level, that's fighting for the space. But ultimately, with an elevator, I mean, from my experience, it's $40,000 to $50,000. It's not terrible. It's a lot cheaper than moving and rebuilding another house.
Totally.
20 years down the road.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it just so happened our mom broke her foot and her dad had to have surgery within weeks of moving in.
No way. Yeah.
And so they would have not, in their last house, we would have had to move them all to the dining room on the main floor.
Right.
So
I think the other thing too is just, I've just taught myself all this and really dove in and figured out just the codes because it's not going anywhere. And now I don't know if you saw or not, but St. Paul is literally following in Minneapolis shoes very, very fast. I mean, they're going to soon be able to do the same thing, 2 to 3 units on any lot in the whole city. They're going to get rid of single-family zoning, and there's going to be spots.
Can you still build a single-family home if you want?
Yep, you can. You could totally. I mean, you could always do that, but they're encouraging more density, and you can build up to 6 units by right in some of these areas, like closer to like McAllister College and some of the college, around the bus routes and stuff. And so that stuff is coming really fast, and I think
it's happening nationwide. I mean, really, Minneapolis was a pioneer in this,
definitely.
right? And now a lot of cities have kind of, it's working.
Yep.
Yeah.
Even Richfield did it. I think Richfield now is allowing duplexes on every single lot. So to me, it's a way.
How do they handle parking? Because parking in Minneapolis is difficult as it is.
Minneapolis literally did away with all of their parking, unless you're doing parking requirements. So I could go and build a 10-unit building and I wouldn't literally, other than to have a drop-on, drop-off spot, I would not have to have any parking.
They want density by any means necessary.
Any means necessary.
Because we're behind.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, if you go to like a city like Washington, D.C., or obviously New York or some of these other ones, I mean, even in a lot of spots in uptown in Minneapolis, those older buildings were built with no parking, right? I mean, they don't have, that's where, it's street parking. That's just the way it is. And, I think it's also this whole thing of, do you really need to, drive your car that far?
A car, right.
Would it be better for you to bike somewhere or to take public transit? Mm-hmm. And I totally get it. Minnesota is a state where everybody wants a car and needs a car because of sometimes the weather and stuff. But I think the more dense our cities become, the more we won't need all those things and we'll have more of those options.
I like the fact, Linden Hills is obviously well celebrated because it's a charming community. I'm biased because I've lived there for 15 years. I don't anymore, but I do like to go back there to Sebastian Joe's and whatnot. But the point is, walking in a community, I really compliment city planners. They don't have an easy job because they hear it from developers. They hear it from me as a builder, but as a person who also lives in the communities, I do like an area that is, who doesn't want to, everyone walk to the coffee shop, walk to, whatever, and the little restaurants. I mean, building that community is really important to our community. So I hope they continue to do that. Well, there's a lot more questions I wanted to ask, but I'm running out of time, so I'm going to give you the rapid fire. Ryan, why don't you take this one? How do you self-educate? I mean, are you a podcast listener? Are you a book reader?
I'm a big podcast listener. I think I only started probably really listening to podcasts about 2 years ago, and now every day on the way into our office, the way back, or anywhere I'm going, I feel bad. I'm like, God, I should maybe listen to some music today, but other than that, I'm listening to podcasts, including yours.
Yeah.
Yep. I mean, I have like my 15 that I've.
Oh wow, that's a lot. I can only handle. I'm like on 3 or 4. I'll usually get through all my podcasts that are weekly, so I'll usually get through all of them by Tuesday.
Okay.
And then I'll do audiobooks the rest of the time.
Okay. Yeah. I do. Most of mine are all about development. Honestly, doing a lot of this multifamily, smaller investments, things like that. So, but I have a fun one here in there. But that's the way I do it, and I think a lot of it's just educating myself with all the new codes and stuff that are coming. And I honestly nerd out on that. I don't know why, but I do.
Yeah. Well, good for you.
Yeah.
Favorite book, Chad?
Favorite book
Could be anything. It doesn't have to be the favorite, but
right now I'm reading Tools of Titans by Tim Ferriss. I wouldn't say it's my favorite book. It's an interesting book. It's more of like a written podcast.
Okay.
It's like a series of interviews of.
I'm sorry. What was it called?
Tools of Titans.
All right. Add it to the list.
He wrote the 4-Hour Work Week, the 4-Hour Chef, the 4-Hour Workout,
4-Hour everything.
Yeah. I don't know if I could name a favorite.
Yeah.
I was a big Stephen King fan for a long time. I like that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But,
well, it's good to let your brain recharge a little bit.
Yeah.
If you Ryan, if you could go back to the very beginning, what advice would you give yourself?
Oh my gosh, why didn't I start sooner? Like literally. I mean, even just.
Why didn't I buy more land back?
Buy more land.
Yeah.
I wish going back when we first started, doing some of the stuff, and back when we bought a bunch of houses in South Minneapolis for $52,000. I'll never forget it. And I'm like, why didn't I buy 150 of those, right? Or have the.
But did you have the?
No,
did you even have the means to do that?
But we had some good investors and stuff back then. I'm like, God, we could have done that. And
right.
I don't know. I wish I would have bought more. It's the whole thing, like where everybody tells you shouldn't be doing that. Boy, you should be scared. You should actually be jumping in with both feet.
Right.
That's the best way to say it.
Yeah. What do you guys do for fun when you're not working?
I'm a big outdoorsy guy. I love getting off the grid as much as possible, hiking, fishing with my buddies, or going off-roading or something, going to Glacier National Park, stuff like that.
Nice.
So
we had a cabin out there for 25 years.
Oh, really?
Yeah. You know where Coram is, or Hungry Horse?
Yeah.
Yeah, we had it right out of Coram. No one knows where Coram. So the fact that you know where Coram is tells me you've been to West Glacier.
Yeah.
It's a gas station in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
But yeah, we were on the anyway, my sister moved to Alaska and I was here with our family, and so it was 1,200 miles doorstep to doorstep. We used to spend a lot of time out there, and anyway, miss it. So,
that's awesome.
Getting into nature, that's how we're successful, I think.
Yeah. Kind of helps you reset everything.
Yep. Yeah, we both love. I love to travel.
Yeah,
we travel a lot.
What's the next trip?
We are literally. Chad's leaving next Thursday.
The family going to Italy.
Nice.
They're going, and then we're all joining up with our parents, with my girlfriend, like a whole nother set of people, and we're going on a Viking River cruise all together. It's been our parents' dream to go in Europe.
Okay.
So
in the Viking River cruise, is that up in the Nordic countries, or is the Viking just the brand of the ship that's taking you down like the Danube?
It's the brand of it, and we're going down the Danube.
Okay.
Yeah,
yep,
Budapest through Germany.
I'd be curious to know.
Germany,
actually, I'll have to check in with you when you're done with that to see. I've heard a number of people that have done that and have really enjoyed it.
Yeah, we were all scared. We're like, boy, are we gonna have to have a walker, get on this thing, or like. But think about it, it's like, no, there's all sorts of people. A lot of people go with their family, or there's people our age that are going alone, and stuff too. So it'll be exciting.
Very cool. Mm-hmm. Well, thank you very much for your times, guys, and
thank you.
Appreciate it. If those listening, you enjoyed it, where can they find you guys?
Probably easiest is our website or Instagram, sustainable9.com, or at sustainable9, the number 9, the numerical 9. So,
or if you're at Cafe Ceres in Linden Hills, you guys are just down the street from there. So go grab a latte or a lavender, whatever drink, and walk over and knock on your door.
Exactly.
Very good. Well, if you've enjoyed this podcast, please rate and review and share. The only way this gets out to more people is if you share it and listen to it, and feel free to leave some comments. And if you're stopping by Sustainable 9, tell them you heard them on The Curious Builder. Thanks for coming in, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to The Curious Builder podcast. If you like what you listen to, please give us a 5-star rating and write us a review. It really means a lot. It's a great way for us to just understand what you like about the podcast and what we can keep doing. So like and review, and please share with your friends and family. Find out more at curiousbuilderpodcast.com.